It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans, and I will be your host this morning. Thanks for joining with us. Appreciate it. Boy, for those of you that are out there joining us on our website, I see a ton of you out there this morning. That's great news. We've been getting a lot of views on our presentations related to this Bundy Ranch thing, and we're going to talk about parts of it this morning. Man, I see folks out there in Delton, that's Ohio, Muncie, I think that's Indiana, Lincoln, Nebraska, Wellington. I see Ashdown. I'm not sure where that is. Baton Rouge. I see Florida. I see, looks like it's the Miami area. I see places out there on the West Coast. So they're up early, obviously. Hey, I'm glad to have you out there. Please make sure that you also visit and join us on Patriot FB. That's Foxtrot Bravo, patriotfb.com. Great website for Patriots. It's kind of a Facebook clone. There's another website that you should be a participant of. It's called constitutionclub.ning.com. That's constitutionclub.ning.com. Constitution Club is another patriotic site where, interestingly enough, they have a mini website for every county in the United States. The cool part of that is that you then have an opportunity to communicate with other people whom are in your local geographic area. So, when you're looking for other people that you can participate with in some planning efforts, it doesn't matter whether you're trying to find somebody who wants to buy your vegetables or whether or not you're trying to find somebody to buy vegetables from or maybe help you with some contracting work, or whether you want to train with those people, plot and plan with those people, whatever. The point is that there's a great resource there available to you. We're going to talk about 4 different topics this morning, which is our normal process. And we've got some big things happening here at AVN, so we're in the process of working with some folks to help sponsor us in a much larger project that will incorporate a video-type studio program that we can really expand what we're doing. And so I'll be very busy over the course of the next week trying to put some business planning together and things like that. Anybody out there that wants to assist me in that, please feel free to give me an email to mike@americasvoicenow.org. We're going to talk about the Bundy Ranch, and we're going to update you on where that stands and what's transpired since yesterday's discussion. And then we're also going to talk about the real reason that the BLM is so desperate to get Bundy off that land. Now, the truth is, and I think we've pretty much got what the truth is, they've been working on, there's been some oil drilling going on out there and some fracking information that's been brought to the fore. And folks, the real reason is definitely not turtles. Let me put it to you that way. There's something far bigger here than a couple of hundred turtles, which aren't even endangered, and which the turtle refuge itself killed half the supply, or half their endangered population, protected population, because they lost their funding. So unless it's as innocent, although sickening, as the turtle people getting back at the Bundys for their loss of revenue, which would be pretty childish, there's far more to this than just a question of turtles. In fact, not only is the turtle argument absurd, but the BLM is also required to produce or provide for the wild horses that are out there. And there are some 2,000 wild horses in the same area. And according to the BLM's own specifications, there's only supposed to be 700. Wow. So if overgrazing is the problem, why aren't they resolving the problem by removing the 1,300 offending wild horses? I'll tell you why. Wild horses don't stop frackers and oil companies from coming in and, damaging the environment where your cattle eat. And that's the real problem here. See, they got to get Clive and Bundy off the land, because otherwise he's going to say, well, wait a minute, I have range rights and water rights here. And if you're going to come in here and frack and drill and blah, 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 then you got to either pay me or you at least got to get my permission. And they don't want that. Our third topic, Elijah Cummings and the IRS. We're also going to talk a little bit about Cheryl Atkinson and how she has made it very clear in public now that the unprecedented influence by the media and special interests and political interests and corporations was what drove her out of communist broadcasting. I mean, CBS. In addition to that, we're going to also make sure that we talk to you a little bit about Senator Sessions and his statement that what we are looking at right now is and this is his quote, folks, not mine, a deliberate plan by the president to collapse U.S. law enforcement efforts. Finally, some straight talk, some plain talk by a member of Congress. I'm stunned. Normally, they couch everything they say and do in, this political doublespeak that basically they prattle on for 5 minutes and don't say anything. In this case, he actually just came right out and said it. There's a deliberate plan by President Obama to collapse the U.S. law enforcement system, specifically within relation to immigration. And we're going to talk specifically about my immigration plan, which is kind of interesting because it looks like Bill O'Reilly has heard it and now has adopted it. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't be so bold. Anyway, our fourth and final topic this morning will be the issue of ammunition that has just been banned by the ATF. President Obama and Eric Holder's assault on guns through a national gun registry, and their plans to institute universal background checks, even though the Senate rejected it. Amazing. I mean, well, I'll get into it when I get into it. It's just incomprehensible to me. You see, this is the progressive mantra that the conservative world doesn't get. They keep pushing, no matter how many times they are rejected, no matter how many times their ideas or their proposals are thrown out for being unrealistic, unconstitutional, immoral, illegal, unethical, whatever. They just keep coming back. No matter how much the public says no, they change the name and they come back with the same program. With all due respect, conservatives, Republicans, anybody in any political arena, I don't care what you call yourself, we could all learn a lesson from the principles that they use, which is relentless. That's the phrase, folks. Relentless. They never, ever give up any ground taken, and whatever they've gained, it's never enough. America, we need to realize that there's some validity in this tactic. You can call it a Cloward and Piven strategy if you want. You can call it Alinsky strategy if you want. But why aren't we learning from that same playbook and then migrating the principle to fall in line with our values? It's a good question for those of you out there who are arguing the case of why is it we can't get traction? I mean, I get it. There are a lot of people coming awake, but are there enough? Is it too little too late? Are we $1 short and a day late? I don't know. All right, let's break into our first topic. An update here is, first of all, a number of militia groups have landed in Nevada. And in addition to that, the Constitutional Sheriff and Peace Officers Association, led by Sheriff Richard Mack, and the Oath Keepers, as well as an entire organization of state legislators and state senators are going to, state House and Senate representatives and assembly members are all going to go out there into Nevada, whatever you want to call it, and they are going to be meeting with, one, the sheriff of Clark County, who clearly needs some kind of constitutional guidance here. And secondly, these people, the state Senate President Andy Biggs and the House of Reps Speaker Dave Livingston, have both agreed that Arizona should be involved in supporting CSA and the Oath Keepers in going to Bunkerville, Nevada, to support the movement for freedom there with Cliven Bundy. Now, State Senators Al Melvin, Chester Crandall, and Kelly Ward, along with State Representatives Brenda Barton, Bob Thorpe, Kelly Townsend, and Warren Peterson, are all planning to be at the Bundy Ranch on Sunday morning. They all plan to attend a press conference on Monday afternoon with the CSPOA, that's the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, led by Sheriff Richard Mack, and the Oath Keepers, and they are going to be meeting with the Bundys and other sheriffs and public officials from across the country. The CSPOA is asking law enforcement personnel and sheriffs to attend and get out there if at all possible and help to support these efforts. They are railing against this bullying and the abuse of constitutional principles that the BLM, the National Park Service, and whatever other tri-letter agencies are out there. So I encourage you to either visit the CSPOA.org or oathkeepers.org, your preference, and find out what you can do. And by the way, they've got a call out there for people to help support and donate some money to help them, I guess, pay for their expenses, and or there are calls for food and water to be distributed out that way for all of the volunteers who are showing up. So if you have any way that you can assist and help in that, you can go to CSPOA or you can go to oathkeepers.org and you can figure out where you can step up to the plate and help in that arena. If you're local in that area, perhaps you can go over there and drop off a couple of 100 pounds of ramen noodles or something. I don't know. But you get the idea. All right. In addition to that, yesterday, the number of people, first of all, that landed there, which were militia members and or protesters, was met or matched by a group of emergency out-of-state Nevada cowboys, if you will, and security people. Now, they're being brought in from all over the country this is becoming, folks, something that is quite dangerous. There was an article this morning in Free Beacon, BLM Rangers brought in from out of state for the Nevada Ranch, quote, emergency. And one of the quotes from the local folks down there is that these guys are coming in and out of the woodwork like hired guns. Armed Rangers were brought in from out of state by the BLM to assist in securely surrounding the Bundy Ranch. This was published on the 10th, yesterday. A heated confrontation on Wednesday. We're talking about Eamon, Cliven Bundy's son, who was tasered and so forth and so on. Some of these guys don't even know why they're here, said Stetzy Bundy, which is Cliven's daughter. A few people have talked to them, and they got called in here on an emergency feed, and they didn't even know what it was for. It just said that they had to be here. They're almost like a hired gun, said Cox. This is Stetzy Bundy Cox. Because what they're supposed to do is they each have a road, and they're told to stay on that road, and they're supposed to keep people off the road by whatever means are possible. That's their job. They don't even know how many cows have been gathered. She said that she had actually spoken to one out-of-state ranger who admitted he was ashamed of his job. Here's what he said. Here's what she said. I actually went and talked to one. He was in the back. Nobody was even talking to him. He didn't say much. He had this huge big gun on him, but he didn't even touch his gun. And I asked him, what are you doing? Do you know what you're doing? You're stealing an old man's cattle, his livelihood. He's a poor man that doesn't have anything. And I said, you're pushing baby cows. I watched a baby cow not want to move, and a helicopter swooped down and honked at him until he began to move. Cox said, the rancher said, no, we don't want that, ma'am. But I saw it, she said. Well, I don't even want to be here. Do you think my grandfather's proud of me? You think I like this? You think this is fun for me, he said. Well, then why are you? What are you doing here, Cox asked him. He said, it's my job. Wow. Where have we heard that before? Where have we heard that refrain before? Think about it now. Yeah. We heard that at Nuremberg. We heard that as the protestations of the guilty who were responsible for, unbelievable acts against other human beings. The truth is, that's not an excuse. One, it's not a good excuse legally. It isn't. And you cannot justify actions which are harmful or illegal based on, I was just doing my job. Secondarily, if that was the case, then every mafia, every member of the mafia would be able to say, hey, I was just doing my job. They told me to go over there and sell the drugs. I go over there and sell the drugs. Right? But more importantly, it's not a moral or ethical stance that you can base and stand upon. You cannot sit there and say, listen, I was just doing my job. I had to draw a weapon on an innocent protester because I let my rage or my temper fly off the handle because they wouldn't, subsume to my authority. Hey, listen, if that's what, if you think that's justification for actions, then I got to tell you, there's really no hope for you. There's no hope for you, one, as a human being, and there's no hope for you as a member of a country that believes that everyone is entitled to have their say, that we have a right as human beings to be able to protest and redress our grievances with our government. Go look at your Constitution. If you haven't read it since high school or maybe elementary school, I don't know what to suggest to you other than the fact that that's on you. But we've heard this refrain before. It didn't hold water then, and it's not going to hold any water now. Yesterday, 20 volunteers did get together, and they went out there on the land, and they did retrieve about 30 head of cattle. Now, they brought these cattle back, and I've got a ton of videos posted up on americasvoicenow.org, on our Facebook page at facebook.com/americasvoicenow, and at patriotfb.com or patriotfb.com. There are a ton of videos, including one that's a long interview from InfoWars with Eamon Bundy, the son of Cliven, and which he talks about the fact that they did get these some 30 or so cattle off the range and brought them back to the Bundy Ranch where they're making sure that they're safe. Because the biggest problem right now is that, one, it's very, very hot out there. Here in the Midwest and in the northern regions of the country, we have not yet felt the full effects of spring. But when you're talking about down there in Nevada, this is very, very deep into the southwest, and it's already very, very high temperatures. Now, there's scant water out there to begin with, and we're going to talk a little bit in our next segment about why the BLM is destroying the water infrastructure out there. They're breaking the infrastructure, the water systems. That's what they were doing with those backhoes the other day. They thought they may have been burying cattle, and they may have. But turns out what they are doing is they're destroying the water infrastructure and the pipes in the ground so that Bundy can't put the cattle back out there after they leave. Even if he's successful and wins, he won't be able to because the infrastructure out there will be busted up. Man, that kind of scorched earth mentality I expect that out of some kind of a totalitarian regime. not out of the Bureau of Land Management. Is that really true land management then? That you're going to destroy the infrastructure, the water supply infrastructure, for an area which, quite frankly, you're supposed to be managing for the highest and best use for the benefit of the public. And if it is the highest and best use for the benefit of the public, then, and Bundy or somebody else is willing to pay you to run cattle on there, but they need the water supply on there, why would you destroy the water supply? I'll tell you why. We're going to find out next, because we're going to talk about the real issue, which is the BLM, Bureau of Land Management, is working on some deals for fracking contracts. Aha. Now the bell starts ringing, right? Now the candle gets lit. What they're really doing is they're making sure these people are off the ground so that they can go out there and get leases for oil drilling and fracking contracts. And, of course, they can't allow Bundy to be on the property because, don't forget, Bundy had legal access and rights to the property, and he has forage rights. Well, these companies are not going to want anybody to be able to supersede their right and their lease to have total and control and access of all areas of the land, to be able to dig and use the water and blah, 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 blah. Think about it, folks. That's the real issue here. We're going to take a break. When we return, we're going to tackle this topic, and we're going to get a little bit in depth of understanding as to what is really transpiring with the real reason that the BLM wants the Bundys gone. We're going to take a quick break. We'll return in just a moment. If you're catching us live on americasvoicenow.org, just stick with us for about a minute and a half while I run through some commercials, and then you can hit the play button again, and you'll pick right back up. Otherwise, you can catch the show live or catch it recorded on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. We have 825 videos up there. We've got videos that go back a couple of years. You can look at all kinds of topics we've covered over the years, and we would greatly appreciate your subscribing to the channel, liking it, and sharing those videos that you find. All right, we'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to America's Voice Now. If you're watching live on video, stick with us. We'll be right back. All right, if you have an opportunity, please make sure that you support our local sponsors. We have a couple of folks here that greatly make sure that, or greatly support our programming here on local radio and our local terrestrial broadcast. The Battery Station over on Washington Avenue, 303 Washington Avenue in West Plains, Missouri. You can reach them by going to the website at batterystation.com. That's batterystation.com. And not only do they sell batteries, but a ton of other great products. And you can also call them at 417-257-7799. That's 417-257-7799. They are also the sponsor of our food co-op program, where you can buy bulk wholesale food at wholesale prices. Below, this is not retail, guys. They order it straight for you at wholesale prices, and you get exactly that price. They don't make a dime on it. It's their community service to us and the listeners of AVN. We'll be back in just a minute. You're listening to America's Voice Now. Thanks for riding with us this morning. I always appreciate it when our listeners catch us live on our website. You can find us there at americasvoicenow.org. If there's any way that you can help support our efforts here, this is purely a voluntary operation. I pay for pretty much everything out of my pocket, with the exception of some very, very limited donations from various listeners. And frankly, we're always in the red, and we could certainly use your help. We try to get out here and put on a program every day that enlightens and educates We encourage you to be a critical thinker. We encourage you to do your own homework, do your own research, your own due diligence, but we give you the basic tools to see how you're being propagandized, how you're being betrayed, how you're being sold down the river. Shouldn't be your sole source, but it should certainly be a starting point where you can gather information that will help you to truly understand the issues that are happening in our news on a day in and day out basis. I post up a ton of stories on our americasvoicenow.org site, our Facebook page at facebook.com/americasvoicenow, and basically in our YouTube channel at youtube.com/americasvoicenow. Basically, if you can remember America's Voice Now, you can find us. And the idea is that we take news stories that are happening every day, and I post a dozen or so of them up every day. And I give you kind of an insight or a little paragraph at the top of each one that is my take on that story and why it's important to you. Sometimes it's just to point out that here's a mainstream media news article, let's say, or a story that's posted that is more interesting to you not because of what they've written, but because of what they've left out. You know, the mainstream Ministry of Propaganda, as I call them, it's the MOP, right? The Ministry of Propaganda. You can ignore calling them the mainstream media. Let's coin the term Ministry of Propaganda, because that's essentially what they are. I posted a story up this morning with Cheryl Atkinson, who left CBS News. That's the Communist Broadcasting Network, because she's very clear here. She's very clear about the unprecedented influence on the media by special interests, political interests, and corporations. She left CBS because they refused to allow her to expose the scandals of the IRS, Benghazi, Obamacare, and numerous other types of stories she'd been doing. She is probably one of the most well-respected journalists in the United States of America right now. She explains exactly how bad things have gotten. The Ministry of Propaganda is now officially a propaganda arm of national and state governments, ladies and gentlemen. And so we try to give you an alternative to that. And we try to kick off, if you will, or jumpstart your critical thinking process. The real reason that the BLM wants the Bundys gone off of that property out there is because they are working on fracking leases. And they're working with oil and natural gas entities that are interested in having access to that property. And here's the problem. They can't have it, and they can't lease it and feel unrestricted in their ability to, gather and drill and do whatever it is that they've got to do with Bundy on the property. Because Bundy's rights to be on the property supersede their lease agreements. Get it? And Bundy is a user of the precious water supply that fracking would require. Remember what fracking is, right? It's water and chemicals, largely made up of, for the most part, water, that are injected down into these wells to pressurize the wells and push the oil or gas up. The Bureau of Land Management has been working, and of course, they're telling us it's about this endangered tortoise. But we know that that's a lie, because they've actually been euthanizing. They have 1,400 of them in a refuge right outside of Las Vegas. That, by the way, has a budget of $1 million a year for 1,400 turtles. Really? Yes, that's the truth. Last year, their budget wasn't met. They have $1 million budget. They only got $290,000. So let's round it up and call it $300,000. They were $700,000 short of their goal. So they euthanized 700 plus of the turtles that they're supposed to be guarding from their endangered status. So this isn't about turtles. We know that. We know that the BLM, there are wild horses out on the same exact stake of ground, the same exact geography that they're talking about Clive Bundy ruining based on his cattle forage. And they're saying that the cattle are eating up, and competing for the same food as the tortoises. Well, guess what? There are 2,000 wild horses on that same exact portion of land. And the BLM is limited to only allowing 700 of them. So guess what? They've got a 1,300 horse overage, and they have done nothing about that. So whose rights supersede what? In other words, does Cliven Bundy have the right to say, hey, these horses are eating the forage that I'm supposed to be paying for, and he has paid for it to those people who want to throw the detraction out there that he hasn't paid. He has. He sent the money into the county government, who does own the land. The BLM manages it, but the county government owns the land. They've rejected it. They said that money has to go to the BLM, and he says, well, I'm not paying the BLM. I'm paying you. Now, there's 1,300 more horses on the property than the BLM is legally allowed to allow. What have they done about that? Nothing. Nada. Zip. Zero. Zilch. They've done nothing about that. So we know it's not about horses, and we know it's not about tortoises, and we know it's not about limited forage. Well, what is it? The Nevada Bureau of Mines and Geology shows a ton of exploratory drilling that's been conducted in the same exact area where the Bundy family has been running these cattle since the 1870s. It's called the Gold Butte area. And there are some maps up on our Facebook page and our website at americasvoicenow.org. It's indicated on these maps in the lower right-hand corner. I've actually given you a couple of links, but one of them is a narrowed, as a close-up link of this area. And you can clearly see this is right to the northeast of Fort Meade. Lake Meade, not Fort Meade. I guess I got the NSA on the brain, right? This is just to the northeast and to the east of Lake Meade. And Gold Butte is directly east and adjacent to Lake Meade. Now, there are pinpoints all over this map that shows where they've been doing gas and oil exploration and fracking exploration and so forth and so on. And the issue here is that the oil that is underneath the ground there and possibly within this Gold Butte area itself, which is where all of this is taking place, is the real reason why the BLM is going after getting these folks off this map. Here's why. The BLM collects $1.27 million in shale fracking leases. And this is in Nevada. So this was just, in fact, this article was just out in a magazine called the shalereporter.com. And here's what they state in the report. This is, of course, this was published 2 weeks ago, so that's before the Bundy thing kind of made the news, right? U.S. Bureau of Land Management geologist Lorenzo Trimble tells the Las Vegas Review-Journal the Elko County oil and gas leases sold Tuesday for $1.27 million to 6 different companies. The auction took place in Reno. The leases are near where Houston-based Noble Energy wants to drill for oil and natural gas on a 40,000-acre portion of public and private land near the town of Wells. The Review-Journal reports the project would be the first in Nevada to use hydraulic fracturing, or fracking, as it's known, to extract oil and gas from shale deposits. So here's what this is really all about, ladies and gentlemen. We know it's not about turtles. We know it's not about cattle. We know that it's not about wild horses who are competing with the forage that they're charging Cliven Bundy for. And honestly, I would put forth the argument that Cliven Bundy would have, which is to say, if the Bureau of Land Management tells me that I've got to pay them to allow my animals to forage on there, and my animals are in competition with 1,300 illegal wild horses on the same property that are competing with the same exact forage that I'm buying and paying for, then I've got a right to say I'm not willing to pay that freight. Has anybody brought that argument to light? I mean, if the BLM is only supposed to have 700 horses on there, but there's 1,300 in excess of that number for a total of 2,000, then those 1,700 horses that are the 1,300 horses that are in excess of the 700 limit are competing for the same fodder that the 900 cows of Cliven Bundy are paying to find. The BLM is running a land theft operation. They claim that they're managing the land, but they haven't managed the wild horses on it. They're killing the tortoises they claim to be saving. And really what this is about is they will bar anyone from utilizing land where they don't get their cut. Boom. That's what this is really all about. Listen, this is no different than a group of gangsters who say, you want to do business in this community? We get our piece. That's how it works. You see, the BLM is not an agency that, first of all law enforcement at this point is really all about generating revenue. Almost none of it is about protecting you, the public. They don't really care a rat's rear end whether you're raped, robbed, pillaged, drug-infested communities. They don't care. That's not what this is about. Look at law enforcement and the actions of law enforcement of late and tell me that any of that has anything to do with really protecting you. The DEA is in open collusion with drug cartels over the Mexican border. Open collusion. They're feeding them guns and ammunition and intelligence so that they can be the kingpin drug cartel. Look, if the DEA was truly interested in wiping out the drug trade, they wouldn't cooperate collectively with one drug gang while trying to put the other drug gangs out of business using that drug gang as the method of access. That's not how law enforcement works. You don't eradicate an enemy by colluding with that enemy or one faction thereof. Not if it's truly an enemy. And that, ladies and gentlemen, that's where the real rub comes from. They're not really the enemy. They're a business partner. Where's the story about the $400 million that the DEA was money laundering that came out a year ago and hit the wires for about 87 seconds and then disappeared from view? $400 million they were caught laundering. The DEA, the largest drug dealer in the history of the planet Earth. Yeah. And they use the courts, all of these administrative agencies, which, by the way, have no constitutional authorization to exist. Let's get it straight and understand right off the bat what the deal is with these administrative agencies. They have no right and authority to exist. I said this yesterday, but for those of you that are new to the program, I mean, the hits are way up on these videos. So let me just explain this to you so you understand it fully. There is not a federal agency in existence, with two exceptions, that has the authority to exist constitutionally. The two that can exist legally are Border Patrol, which is a legitimate, federally mandated by the Constitution obligation of the federal government. The second one is Commerce. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. And they're really not even agencies. You know, Commerce is not an agency, it's a department. That's it. The rest of these agencies have no authority to exist. None. Why? How can I say such a thing? Let me make it very clear and very simple for you to understand. We gave Congress, as we the people, as in the consent of the governed, we gave Congress limited power of authority to act on our behalf. Number one, that presumes that they're always acting on our behalf, which clearly has not been the case in a very, very long time. Number two, we gave them the authority to act on our behalf, but only them, because they are elected and we have a methodology of removing them from office in theory, assuming that they are not following or doing what is in our best interest or following our direction. Here's the problem. They have subdelegated the power of attorney we have given them to unaccountable, unnamed, unelected individuals who, quite honestly, if you take a look at every administrative agency, none of them swear an oath to the Constitution. None of them. A few law enforcement agencies do, and that's it. The National Park Service, they do not take an oath, ladies and gentlemen. The Bureau of Land Management, they do not take an oath to the Constitution. Did you know that? No, you probably didn't. Neither does the FAA, neither does the FCC, neither does the FDA, the USDA, the ATA. I mean, go on and on and on and on and on. I can give you the laundry list. It's about 1,000 names long. All of them made up of initials. The Department of Education, no such luck. They make no oath to defend and protect the Constitution or to operate within its boundaries. And so think of it this way. You, because you want to buy a piece of real estate. So you go to a friend of yours and you say, look, I'm going to give you a limited power of attorney to act on my behalf because I got to be out of town. So I'm giving you this power of attorney to go close on that real estate deal. Here's my checkbook and here's the power of attorney I give you. And it allows you to deal in real estate in my name, but for this limited period of time. And he takes it and he says, that sounds great. I'll be more than happy to help you out. You zip off to vacation. A week later, he goes up to the closing, and he realizes that he's got a date. He doesn't want to show up at the closing tomorrow. So he calls his friend, who you don't even know, and he says, listen, I'm going to give you this power of attorney, and I'm going to allow you to go to the closing for me because I can't make it. So the friend that you don't know and have no idea what his ethics or morals or legalities are, he goes to your closing, and while he's at it, he writes himself a check out of your bank account for $10,000. Then while he's at it, he also has another piece of paper drawn up that says, hey, this piece of property that I'm buying, I'm going to transfer it into my name. Then he zips off, never to be seen from or heard from again. He has no accountability to you. You can't even find out who he is and what he was doing. You go back to the person that you did give the power of attorney to, and he shrugs his shoulders and says, hey, I just handed power of attorney off to Bob because I couldn't be there. You get the analogy, ladies and gentlemen? You have handed Congress a very, very clear and specific but limited power of attorney. They have taken that and expanded its authority without your permission and delegated it out to all of these other people who have not sworn an oath to protect and defend you, that they're not elected, so you can't remove them from office when they trespass and go against our best wishes, and they don't even have our best wishes as part of their policy statement, as part of their mission statement. Their intent is for growth, the growth of their agency, not your betterment, not your improvement, not for the betterment of the nation as a whole, not for the betterment of their state, just for the betterment of their three-letter agency. That's the problem. And on top of that, once they're hired in, they can never be fired, ever. Who ever gets fired from the federal government? I mean, you have to walk up and slap Michelle Obama across the face and pee on her shoes in order to get fired in this government. And even then, you'd probably just get moved laterally to a different department. I mean, realistically, folks, you got to realize what's going on here. The BLM has not taken some kind of an oath of office to protect and defend the land of Nevada. They've taken an oath, if anything, to protect and expand the Bureau of Land Management and their authority and power and influence. That's all. We're going to touch on this when we talk on our last topic this morning, and I'm going to show you exactly how this works, because Eric Holder is a perfect example of this kind of abusive tactic. What he's doing is he's asking for vast budget increases to hire literally thousands of ATF agents to go out and photocopy the books of all the gun dealers in the country. He's doing a backdoor methodology of registration. Now, that's not in the best interest of America. That's not in the best interest of you as a gun owner. They're barred and prohibited legally from doing it. But he doesn't care because the law doesn't apply to these people. And the law doesn't apply to the BLM either. As long as their goal is met, which is what? More money, more power, more authority. And how do they get that? Well, BLM is not a law enforcement agency like a police force that can go out there and write tickets and drive revenue that way. Let me tell you something. Your local law enforcement is not law enforcement there to serve and protect anymore. Now they're there as a revenue source. They're salesmen. They're bringing home the bacon. That's all they do. They don't write you a ticket for not wearing a seatbelt because that's really a safety issue. Come on. They're not kicking down the door of an innocent person and forfeiting their house and their property and their real estate and their automobiles and their businesses because that's in the best interest of the nation. They're doing that because when they forfeit that, they get to keep the money. Follow the money. The BLM is running a land theft operation. They claim it's management, and it's not. It's only managing it when it's in their best interest. And they utilize the excuses of the enviro tyrants that are out there to protect, a squirrel or a snake or a fish or whatever, the spotted owl. And then they turn around and they couldn't care less about the enviro tyrants. All they're doing is using them in a pawn in a game that they don't even know they're playing in. This is much bigger. The same thing with these race wars that we've got going on in the United States right now. These race issues, the United States of America is pitting, rich against poor, black against white, brown against black, brown against white, white against brown, gay against straight. They're pitting all of us against each other because as long as we are fractured in that format, we cannot lock elbows, stand together and say, we're not the problem, you're the problem. And they're utilizing us as pawns in a game that we don't want to, one, participate in, but two, we don't even know we're being played. This is nothing more than a protection mafia gangster racket. Get the Bundys off and get high-dollar leases for fracking and oil in. That's what this is about. Nothing more, nothing less. And let me tell you something. Those people that you've been watching in the videos, they are not BLM employees, and they are not National Park Service employees. These people are being brought in from the outside. They are contractors. You watch and see how this plays out. I'm willing to bet you money right now that these people, in a significant number of these people, are not BLM and NPS employees. One, they're kitted out way too well. Two, their tactics are way too aggressive for, the easy life of a BLM and an NPS employee. I've seen BLM and NPS employees. Trust me, they are not aggressive and kitted out and tactically minded like these guys. You watch and see. This will play. If anybody's ever able to figure it out and pull the information together, you're going to find that these people are not employees. They're outside contractors brought in. They're given a costume to wear. It's a khaki costume. But the real truth is these people are not your typical NPS and BLM employee. You watch and see. I can't prove it at this point because I'm not on scene, and all of that. But it'll be played out, and you will find out in the end. These people are not what they are perceived to be. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to tackle our third topic, which is Elijah Cummings, the IRS, the conflict of interest associated with that. He sits on the committee that's investigating the IRS, and yet it turns out he's been colluding with the IRS to do the exact same thing he's supposed to be investigating them for the whole time. I got to tell you, folks, this is beyond comprehension. And then on top of that, we're going to talk about a few other things, not the least of which is Senator Sessions came out and said that the Obama administration has a deliberate plan to collapse U.S. law enforcement in the immigration area. Wow, some fresh, frank talk. We're going to talk about that in a minute. You're listening to America's Voice Now. Ride with us for the morning. If you are watching this or listening to this, please make sure that you share this program with your personal circle of influence. That's the only way we're going to get heard, folks. I'm alternative media. I'm one flea on the elephant's hiney. Help me help you. But you got to share the information and say, hey, here's a guy worth watching. We'll be back in just a minute. You're listening to America's Voice right now.
It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. Thanks for riding with us this morning. You are joining us halfway through our program. We broadcast Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. Central till about 9:45 Central, 9:45 a.m. The program is available on our podcasted Spreaker application, which, by the way, you can download to your cell phone. You can get that program by going on to your either iPhone or Android, the app server, and you can download an application for Spreaker. It's like speaker, but with an R, Spreaker. When you get that application downloaded, you can simply search for America's Voice Now, Michael Evans, and then you will be able to find every episode that we do, and you can listen to them at your leisure. We also have a listen line for those folks that want to listen to the program but don't have internet access or high-speed internet, or can't listen to it because of timing. We have a listen line provided for us by a company called Audio Now, and they provide it for us free of charge, so I got to love that, and you do too. It costs you nothing to use it, and it costs us nothing to have it. They're paid by the carriers. And so you can call this listen line 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you can listen to the program at your leisure. And so as of about 10 a.m. this morning, you'll be able to listen to this morning's program lickety-split. You just dial the number. If you're out driving around and you're working, or if you're out, and you're out and about doing your job, and you got a cell phone with you or what have you, or even on your home phone, you can just dial the number, and then you'll be able to listen to the entire 100-minute program at your leisure and convenience. The phone number for that is 415-325-0725. If you have a radio program of your own and you'd like Audio Now to provide you with this service, you can go to audionow.com. I think it's .com. It's either .com or .org, and they'll provide you with the same service. So I'm very, very grateful to them. The phone number, again, for a listen line it's radio by phone. That's their slogan. Radio by telephone. How cool is that? 415-325-0725. All right, so we have two different topics we're going to talk about here this morning. One is Elijah Cummings, and he's the Democratic House representative who sits on the committee that is investigating the IRS, along with Darrell Issa. The second one we're going to talk about is Senator Sessions, who's come out and made it probably the most blunt and forthright and honest statement I've heard out of anybody in Congress in years. The President of the United States of America, quote, is on a deliberate plan by the President to collapse the U.S. law enforcement system with regard to immigration. Boom. How long have we been waiting to hear that kind of straight talk, folks? Let's talk about Elijah Cummings first. I touched on him the other day. He sits on the committee to investigate the IRS. But it turns out, and all along, by the way, he's been providing cover for them by saying, this investigation is over, it needs to be closed, it's finished, it's a dead end, there's nothing to see here, move along. This is, this is a figment and a fantasy of these Republicans who are just desperate to get at the president. That's what he's been saying. He's been apologetic on the record, apologizing to these people for being brought to testify, constantly throwing comments out there during these hearings, and giving cover, essentially. Well, now it turns out, now we see why. He wanted the investigation stopped. You know why? Because it turns out he's been in collusion with the IRS for exactly what they're being investigated for. This is the equivalent, ladies and gentlemen, of finding out that the judge who's about to hear a case has been in business with the defendant and forgot to tell everybody conveniently and willfully misheld or withheld the information. That's essentially what this is. Here's the deal. Cummings has denied on tape that he has ever had any kind of contact at all with the IRS that was, out of context with the normal request for information. But that's not true, which means that we've got a sitting representative in the House who lied to Congress and his fellow committee members. He lied to them. That means he didn't just lie to them, he lied to us, which means he needs to be removed from his seat and labeled dishonorably discharged. What does that mean? That means he needs to be removed from office and barred from ever running for office again. He needs to be given the scarlet letters of DD, dishonorably discharged. There is no question that he sought to hide his involvement with the IRS on this issue. And furthermore, that he sought to close the investigation down before his involvement could be exposed. Folks, that is insane. If that happened in a courtroom, if the prosecutor was found to be in collusion with the guy who is being tried for the crime, and everybody's in the courtroom sitting there and wondering, why is the prosecutor not asking the right questions? Why is the prosecutor not exposing the evidence that he has? And then suddenly it comes to light. We get it. The prosecutor and the defendant are related to each other, or they're best friends for life, or they're in business together. Or worse yet, the prosecutor was assisting him in robbing the bank. He gave him the plans. Is this any way to run a nation? There is no question that he sought to hide his involvement, and furthermore, that he sought to close the investigation before his involvement could be revealed to the public or to his other committee members even. I mean, this isn't like Darrelisa and the other people, the other 5 members up on the committee knew. They didn't. In fact, they asked him and he said no. That cannot stand, ladies and gentlemen. If we have any expectation, and if this government has any expectation that we are going to grant them a level of credibility, then the citizenry has to have some level of faith in their activities and in their stance and in their position and their role in their watchdog capability. If that's not the case, then they don't expect to lead. They expect to rule us. Now, whether you agree with that and that they lead or rule, that's entirely up to you. I'm telling you that their goal has always been to rule. They don't really want to lead you. They don't care about you. And there's more than enough of them if you disappear off the face of the earth that they don't really need you. You have to look at these people the way in which they look at you. When their mask comes off and their fancy suit comes off and their media attention comes off, they are nothing more than the dukes and the lords and the ladies of old. You're a peasant. You are necessary, but only to the extent that you produce something for them. And that from time to time, they allow 1 or 2 individuals to come before them and beg for and plead for some mercy or some small crumb off the table. And, they grant it or don't. The problem is that they don't lead us. They rule us. And since that is the case, they must all be removed. And they have to be replaced with the full knowledge of the replacement people who come in, that any actions that they would commit that would be similar to the toilet we just flushed will be met with a claim that it's an act of treason or an act at very, very least that will permanently bar them and immediate removal. We're not talking here about, some long-winded, censure and all of that nonsense. It will result in prison terms at best and a death sentence for treason at the worst. You want accountability in government? You want people who actually serve you, not the other way around? Then those people have to be held accountable. And the only way to hold them accountable is to put them up there and say, not only are you now on a pedestal, and you're above the rest of us, but the responsibility that we've given you to carry around greatly increases your risk. When you violate that responsibility and the duty and the oath and the obligation that you've sworn to, then we're going to hold you more accountable than we would anyone else. If we're not willing to go there, then ladies and gentlemen, I got to tell you, we're not really willing to take this nation back. We're not willing to have this go back to any semblance of true republicanism and true representative government. And I don't mean republicanism as in the party name. I mean a true guaranteed Republican style of government, one that is a representative democracy. Government's sole function is to protect and defend the indefensible, the citizenry itself. When government has become when government has become the predator and we are the prey, hey, we got nothing further to talk about. It's that simple. Elijah Cummings is a predator. He's a predator. He doesn't look like a predator. He doesn't look like a cat laying there waiting for the mouse to come by. He doesn't look like, what you would envision a predator to look like. But he is a predator nonetheless. In fact, he's even more effective and he's all the more dangerous because he has the ability to chameleon-like adapt to his environment and change. There is no doubt in my mind that Elijah Cummings owes America an explanation for his conflict of interest and for lying to his own committee. And there is no doubt in my mind that immediately thereafter he needs to be removed and labeled permanently as dishonorably discharged. All right. Let's get on to Senator Sessions. He came out yesterday and he said, wisely, that the president is on a deliberate plan to collapse U.S. law enforcement system on immigration, where it relates to immigration. Now, what's really interesting about this, and there's a video that's associated to it, so please jump on americasvoicenow.org or facebook.com/America's Voice Now, America's Voice Now, so that you can actually hear. It's a 5-minute video, and it'll blow your mind. Here's what he says, in part. Our law enforcement system is in a state of collapse, and it's a deliberate plan by the President of the United States, and it's wrong. And people need to be aware of it and need to stand up to it, and I believe the American people are beginning to do so. He rebukes Eric Holder and Joe Biden as part of the problem with their pro-amnesty efforts. He goes on to say, so you come into the country illegally, and the Attorney General of the United States declares that these individuals have a civil right to amnesty. How can this possibly be? The chief law enforcement officer in America. Then on Vice President Biden, he goes on to say, Vice President Biden recently said, and I quote, 11 million people live in the shadows. I believe they're already American citizens. End quote. 11 million undocumented aliens are already Americans? Goodness, the Vice President of the United States would make such a statement. It's stunning beyond belief. Let me tell you what the immigration plan is that I have been discussing for years. And it's interesting because it looks like I heard O'Reilly throw his plan out the other day, which he's got up on BillO'Reilly.com. And it's very, very closely paralleling and allied to the plan that I've been talking about for years. Now, I'm not going to be presumptuous enough to say he stole my idea, but because I've heard others kind of throw ideas similar to it around as well. But the fact of the matter is that, and his actually doesn't go quite as far, but the fact of the matter is that if we want to resolve immigration in this country, we have to put in a plan that looks similar to this. No immigration changes of any way, shape, or form or kind until the borders are independently and verifiably sealed. What does that mean? That means that they must be sealed tighter than a gnat's butt. And what that means is a double-sided fence with a no man's land in between, just like you have in separating North and South Korea, just like you had separating East and West Germany. That's how borders are built, folks. You can say, well, that's insane. Why would we want to? What kind of a gulag? No, it's not a gulag. We're trying to keep people out that don't belong here. This is not an issue of morality. And if it was, then we wouldn't have a border at all. But they can't quite go there because they know that the public will never accept it. That is the goal ultimately. Because, look, their goal is not, international borders. Their goal is a unified global government run by a very, very small elite oligarchy. No immigration changes until the borders are independently proven to be verifiably sealed. When I say independently, I mean we can't have Border Patrol tell us it's sealed because we can't trust DHS, who runs Border Patrol. What we need is a national immigration ombudsman, somebody who has 100% full access to everything Border Patrol has, but does not owe any allegiance to the federal government and owes all of its allegiance to we the people. He and she and that committee or group can sit there and say, yes, we believe the border is verifiably sealed. Second, we then offer a 1-year period of registration for all illegals that are already here within the borders. 1 year. Those who don't register immediately upon their discovery are deported and never allowed to reapply, ever. You get one crack at this. You get one shot at amnesty. And after that, you're done. We don't owe you anything. We don't owe you anything to begin with. We're graciously allowing you to step up and say, I am here illegally, and I intend to apply and come into the country and do it right. If they have a criminal history, immediate deportation with no hope of return. If they have been here before and they've been deported before, you're out. You're done. Those who register are then put at the very, very end of the line, and they must go back home until their number comes up, just like everyone else. Oh my goodness, that's the end of the program right there. You just went too far. No, I didn't. The truth of the matter is, you're not willing to go far enough. If you're found crossing the border after the sealing is accomplished, you are summarily deported with a publicly visible tattoo and a guaranteed DNA, fingerprint, facial recognition identification. If you cross again, you will be imprisoned on the border at hard labor for 10 years, and then you will be deported again. If you cross a third time, you will be removed from the equation. You expand temporary work visas, but you have tracking and you have monitoring. You can provide work visas where people come over the border or come in for the summer or the harvest seasons. You can allow people to come here and work here temporarily on visas from foreign nations that aren't sharing a border with us. I'm okay with that. In fact, we have to expand the citizenship limitations dramatically with caveats. But here's the deal. If you want to come here, you have to live by the rules under our roof. You say that to your children, but why won't you say it to a group of illegal aliens? If you're going to live in this house, you're going to live under the rules of my roof. But when it comes to illegal aliens, you're like, well, there really are no rules. You can come in and go as you please. We can expand citizenship limits dramatically. In other words, allow far more of them in. There's the limitation that we've imposed has been imposed by us. To what end? I mean, if we impose a limit here, but the borders are wide open over there, what's the point? The only difference is, if we're going to allow you to come in here and apply for citizenship, and we're going to greatly expand that number, you have to have a job and an education. You have to bring assets with you, and you have to be 100% self-sufficient. You pay your own way. You contribute to the tax base. No free rides for anyone. And by the way, that includes our own hapless. Our own hapless. These are the folks. These are not the helpless folks. These are the lazy, the hapless, the shiftless, the bored, and the willfully stupid. Let me tell you why this matters. Because this is a policy that is far more generous and far more compassionate than virtually every other nation on the planet. It's more generous and compassionate than the countries they're coming from. And you can't have it both ways. This immigration problem is the fault of the United States government. They've allowed this to go unchecked for so long that at this stage in the game, we need a dramatic correction. Dramatic. That's right. Dramatic means a fence here, a big swath of 300 yards, and another fence there. That's going to be very expensive. It won't even touch the cost of maintaining all of the aliens that are already here. So stop with the nonsense. Stop with the mamby-pamby utopian fantasy garbage. The truth of the matter is, we expend annually far more than it would ever cost to build a group of fences. And I don't want to hear the argument, you build a high fence and I'll build a higher ladder. We've been hearing that for decades now. The truth of the matter is, it's not a higher fence. It's a fence that actually has meaning and substance. You have less than a 1% chance of being ejected and deported from this nation if you're already here. The Obama administration has been lying to us all along about how many people they're deporting. It's not anywhere close to their numbers. All the people that they're deporting are caught coming over the border, but they're not deporting anybody that's already here. And half the time, they're not even deporting them as they catch them. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. We have one more topic we're going to hammer on this morning, and then we are wrapped up for the weekend. Our last topic will be a brand new assault by Eric Holder, the White House, on ammo, which is a brand new ammo which has come out and been banned by the ATF, a national gun registry in defiance of Congress, and their plan to disarm you. We'll be right back. Promised to return, and I have. So, there's a couple of things that you need to know about. There was a lot of push after Sandy Hook, or Sandy in Connecticut, to disarm the American population. No, it's not about your children. they don't really care. You have to realize how you're viewed. You are merely fodder, and you are a resource for the oligarchy in charge. This is the 535 members of Congress, the couple of hundred people that are tied immediately to the executive office, and the few hundred people that run the judicial system, including the 9 Supreme Court black robes. It's also a small contingent of maybe another 1,000 people that run the administrative agencies that, for all intents and purposes, pass all the laws. Did you know that Congress only passed about, 300 laws in 2012? Yet the administrative agencies passed well over 6,000. Well, they're not laws, say the liberals, say the progressives, say the government defenders, the government apologists. They are laws. They carry the capability and the wherewithal to imprison you, to fine you, to put you out of business, to put you behind bars on a personal level, to restrict your access to trade. They're laws. If it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, has webbed feet, wiggles its tail, it's a duck. They act and parade about as a rule and a regulation, but they are in reality law. And they're executed, and you're held accountable by administrative law judges who bar your ability to even have your right, your constitutionally guaranteed right to a jury trial. Go before an administrative law judge that represents the BLM or the USDA or pick any one of 100 agencies. Pick any one of 1,000 agencies. You don't have a jury trial. You are heard by an administrative law judge who actually worked for the agency or owes, at least a base minimum, owes his allegiance to the agency because that's where his livelihood comes from. And more often than not, he hears those cases in that given circuit or district or region or whatever the geography is. Now, we have a lot of rogue agencies in the country. EPA is one of them. Completely, totally, and utterly out of control. But they're not the only one. The ATF, which, when held up against the Second Amendment, is the equivalent difference of matter and antimatter. In other words, the two can never occupy the same space. You cannot have a Second Amendment that is actually honored and an ATF because the two are diametrically opposed. It's like trying to make a magnet work from both sides. It doesn't. From both polarities. It doesn't. Those polarities will never meet. They'll never stick together. They'll always push each other apart. But the Obama budget is laying the groundwork for a new universal gun registry that the Senate has rejected out and out repeatedly. There are already prohibitions against a registry being developed that are already in the law. But that doesn't mean anything to Eric Holder and Barack Hussein Obama. It doesn't mean anything to the Secretary of the ATF. This is the same Secretary of the ATF, by the way, who is involved and has substantially supported the operations that have gone on in this country, which have been an embarrassment to us as a nation and the cause of death of untold numbers of individuals. No, he was not the Secretary of the ATF at the time that Fast and Furious happened. But he was working for the ATF, and he was a part of the organization. And, the list of bungling programs that the ATF has put on, in law enforcement circles, the ATF is known as F-Troop. If you don't know that, go ask somebody in federal law enforcement, what's the nickname for the ATF? They'll tell you it's F-Troop. Remember F-Troop? Corporal Agarn with the hat on, and, they were the Keystone Cops of the cowboy days. Well, that's essentially the ATF's reputation in law enforcement. They're heavy-handed. They are out of control. They are relentless, and they are lawless. And they just banned the import of a new, not a new, but a ammunition that goes by the nomenclature of 5.45 by 39. Now, they're classifying it as armor piercing, and that's the explanation they're using to ban it. It's not, by the way. The 5.45 by 39 is an Eastern European weapon round. And for those of you that are not into the gun thing, let me just help you grasp the concept here. The Kalashnikov, or the AK-47 you've heard about, and what we would call a 7.62 or a 308, are similar in size, and the bullet's a 30 caliber bullet, which means it's 0.3 inches of 0.30 of an inch, right? A third of an inch. And they have a lot of powder behind them, so they can go a long way, and they have a lot of kinetic energy when they land. Then our military uses something called the 5.56, or what's called the 2.23, which is 0.223 of an inch, right? 5.56 millimeters equates 0.223 inches. It's the old imperial metric conversion. In Europe, they have the 5.45 by 39, which is their answer to the 223, or the 5.56 that the United States uses in every AR-15, M16, blah, 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 blah. Last Friday, Eric Holder testified before a House Appropriations Subcommittee on behalf of his department's proposed budget for 2015. Now, this is a man who, quite frankly, should be in prison, not testifying about the magnificence of this budget he's put together. And apparently, he did not think that anybody was actually going to read his written submissions. They thought they were only going to go by his verbal testimony, right? Well, here's the interesting aspect. He asked Congress in this request for an appropriation on his budget to implement a universal gun registry, which the president would create via executive fiat, executive order. That won't happen, you keep saying. Well, we never thought any of these other assaults were going to be on weapons either, but let me tell you something. What you don't realize is that they are going about it, and I'll explain to you how as we get a little further into this subject this morning. He is intending to implement a universal gun registry by executive fiat that Congress has already said no to, repeatedly. Repeatedly. He's also pushing this smart gun agenda that says every gun has to have a bracelet that's tied to it, so that if you're wearing the bracelet, you can use the gun. If you don't have the bracelet on, you can't use the gun. And the claim, of course, is that under the smart gun technology, no one would be able to steal a gun or buy a gun on the street unless they bought the gun and the bracelet together, and blah, 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 blah. Well, first of all, there has been a New Jersey Institute of Technology study and a test done on the smart gun technology that shows that, one, it only works about 80% of the time. That's the first problem with it. The second problem with it is that immediately the technology will be hacked. I mean, guys, they can clone your cell phone in 30 seconds flat from the time that it's initially introduced to the marketplace. How long do you think it's going to take them to reverse engineer the concept of how you can program your own bracelet to go with the gun that you just bought? It's a stupid idea. It's not a smart gun. It's a stupid idea. Even cops, by the way, have rejected this whole concept. The argument they were given was, well, if you have a smart gun and somebody gets your weapon away from you, they won't be able to use it against you. Let me tell you something. Look up the statistical numbers of guns that have been taken from cops and then used on them. They're so insignificant, ladies and gentlemen, they don't even move the radar knob. Not to mention the fact that the technology, while it's been tested or investigated, doesn't actually exist. So what are we going to do? Say nobody can buy a gun until some, entrepreneurial scientist comes up with the smart gun technology that actually works? And who's going to pay for it all? I mean, what's the cost associated to now tying that gun to a bracelet? What about all the existing guns out there? What are you going to do? Force everybody to retrofit them? Oh, I get it. You don't want to retrofit them. You just want everybody to turn in the old ones. No thanks. There was one gun that hit the market very briefly. It was called an Armatix 22 caliber. But the outrage from the public, got the thing pulled off the shelves so fast, you can't even find one. They're probably a collector's item right now. Well, here's the deal. His budget for this year shows that the administration is trying to quietly create an infrastructure for a universal gun registry. What they're doing is they're asking for program increases, and here's how they're going to do this. Holder said this program enhancement, and hear the phrase now and use your critical thinking skills. This program enhancement will double the capacity of the existing NICS, which is the National Information or Instant Check System. This program enhancement will double the capacity of the existing NICS system. These expansions are vital to ensuring that the NICS system can support a universal background check requirement, which is expected to double the gross NICS transactions necessary. Well, that makes sense, you say. Hold on right there. Stop. What he doesn't mention, and you should know, is that even the Democratic Senate rejected and defeated the last attempt they made to pass a universal background check system. So he's trying to get funding for a project that doesn't exist, has been unconditionally prohibited by federal government and by his own Democratic senators. So in effect, here's the deal. He's asking for $100 million, and 524 new personnel, brand new people. This is mission creep, folks. 524 people and $100 million to implement a program which is illegal. It's illegal. It gets worse. Since he has been prohibited from implementing a way in which he can force everyone to register their weapons through the universal background system that doesn't exist, and number two has been made illegal, he's seeking to hire 255 brand new agents at a cost of $51.5 million to go out there and make photocopies of every form that gun dealers have in their facilities. Now, for those of you that have never bought a gun, when you go into a buy a gun from any gun dealer, the federal law requires that you fill out a form 4473. Basically, it asks for your name and all your personal information, your name, your address, your social security number, your date of birth, and all of this information. You have to check off a bunch of these boxes. No, I'm not a drug addict. No, I've never been declared mentally incompetent. No, I don't have any, I don't have any criminal background, blah, 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 blah. Then you sign it and you date it. Then the gun dealer takes this and he goes and makes a phone call to the NICS system and he says, okay, I got Bob Smith here. His phone number is 12345. His social security number is 6789110, and he lives at 123 Main Street. And his, here's all his personal information. Someone on the other end of the phone line plugs that information into the system, or they do it electronically now. And basically, they do a quick background check on you and say, okay, this guy hasn't been arrested for anything. He's not a felon. He's not, an escapee from a mental institution. We don't have any records that he's been secured in a mental institution. He's cleared to buy a gun. And they give the dealer a control number. The control number gets written in on the form. And then the form gets held and filed by the gun dealer forevermore. He can never get rid of those forms. He must hold them in his possession forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, or until he gives up his gun dealer's license, the federal firearms license he's been issued by the ATF, at which point he has two options. Or no, he has one option. He has to turn in his logbooks. The logbooks, this is the book that says, I bought a gun from XYZ Distributing, and the serial number is, and its model number X, and its serial number is 1234, and I got it in on this date. And then on this date, I sold it to Joe Smith, and here's the information on Joe Smith. And then that is connected and correlated, including the control number, back to the 4473 form. Okay? Now, the dealer holds on to these 4473 records indefinitely. And at the end of the, if they go out of business or closes the business down or turns his license in and says, I'm retiring, whatever the case may be, they're then required to turn those logbooks over to the ATF. And they're now required to send in the 4473 forms. But you got to realize that there are probably a couple of 100 million of those forms that are already out in the world right now that the ATF does not have. And that has all the information they need to know who's got what and what they bought. Because on the back of the form, the dealer, after he sells you the gun, is required to put down the name and the serial number, the model of the weapon, and the serial number of it, and the date he sold it to you. So if you've gone in and you've bought 10 guns over the course of 5 years or 15 years, it doesn't make any difference. The dealer has got all of those records. So the ATF is hiring, according to Eric Holder, at the cost of $51.1 million, and I apologize, I gave you the 51.5 before, but it's $51.1 million, hiring 255 new agents and other personnel for enforcement and inspections. And here's what they're doing. These people are going around to all of the gun dealers, and they are copying all of the 4473s, the forms, and the bound book entries. And they're taking these 4473s and the bound book entries, and they're manually creating a database, which, by the way, under federal law, they are prohibited from doing anyway. Now, they say, well, we're really not doing this. We're not creating a database. If you believe that, I've got, oceanfront property in the middle of Arizona to sell you. They're physically copying the 4473s and the bound book. That means that they've got a record of every gun that's ever been sold since 1968. Hello? There are, by the way, on Gun Owners of America's website, there are dozens of first-hand gun dealer accounts of this happening. So if you disbelieve what they're attempting to do, you can go to gunownersofamerica.org and you can read it for yourself. Then, of course, recognize that under Holder's plan for everybody to get a universal background check, that means that the gun dealers are now going to have an entire influx of brand new 4473s and logbook entries, because if you can't go in and buy a gun from your neighbor, let's say you and your buddy who lives next door to you, he's got a shotgun, his kid is outgrown, and he says, well, you got a younger son, and, you want to go turkey hunting, so here, I'll sell you little Bobby's shotgun, because little Bobby's not little anymore, and you can give it to little Joey. Now you would have to, right now, it depends on what state you live in, but right now in most states in the country, you could just do it. You give him $50 and he hands you the gun, and boom, you're good. They want you to have to go down to a gun dealer and bring the gun down. And your neighbor has to come down and give it, put it down in the logbook as he transferred it to the dealer. Then the dealer did a 4473 background check on you, and then he has to log the gun out as having been sold to you. And, of course, there will be a fee associated with it. That will give them a consistent record of every gun sold, not just those sold since 1968, through gun dealers, but all guns sold privately, personally, otherwise. So under the new proposed budget, there will be an enormous stack of new 4473s and all these people to go out there and track them. Now, let's go back to the background thing. You see, under the illegal universal background check system, every gun that's sold would have to be transferred through a dealer, right? What is the first step to confiscation of weapons is knowing who's got what. That's the goal. Here's the problem. And this is the way that Larry Pratt puts it in this argument from Gun Owners of America. Think about it. With Republicans expected to take the Senate back this fall, and which will naturally mean Obama will be stymied legislatively, he has every incentive to go full tyrant. In other words, meaning he will pass executive orders in a mountain. And that apparently is exactly what he intends to do. Now, they also declared the 5.45 by 39 ammo as armor piercing, and they've outlawed it. This, ladies and gentlemen, is another lawless decree by the Secretary of the ATF, who, in the examples I gave you in earlier segments of today's show, I said to you, these people in all of these administrative agencies are not elected. They're not accountable. The ATF, the Secretary of the ATF says, by my decree, as the Secretary of the ATF, that ammunition is illegal. And guess what? There's nothing you or I can say and do about it. Nothing. It's out of our hands. You know why? Because he's not accountable to us. He was never elected. He's appointed. He's appointed. And we have no recourse. We can't, I suppose you could maybe file a lawsuit. Have you got the $10 or $20 or $30,000 it's going to take you to get through federal court, only to have every justice between here and the Supreme Court deny you because they give them deference? Ladies and gentlemen, our freedoms aren't slipping away. The reason these people are after your weapons is because they intend to do you harm once you no longer have them. That's the long and the short of it. Every nation that has ever removed the weaponry from the hands of their citizens has then turned around and gone full tyrant. If you want to live under that kind of a regime and be defenseless, then that's entirely up to you. But I got to tell you something. That's not the way that this nation was designed and built. Our founders gave us the ability, the wherewithal to defend ourselves and, if necessary, take our nation back with the use of arms. That's the whole purpose of the Second Amendment. It has nothing to do with duck hunting. It has nothing to do with shooting a deer in the backyard or out in the woods. It has everything to do with your having the ability to say, we collectively, we the people, have realized that we are no longer under the consent of the governed, that we are now the slaves under the masters and the rulers. And we intend to change that by violent action if necessary. That's it. Everything else is propaganda and marketing. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. If you can help support this program, please do so. You can go to our website where you can make a one-time donation or you can make a pledge that takes it out of your PayPal account every month. We desperately need your help. We're always in the red. I always have to cover it out of my pocket, and it's a big chunk of money. I don't get paid, so you don't have to worry about somebody abusing your money. Trust me, there ain't no extra to abuse. I pay for everything. So if you can help us and support us, please do that. I'd be forever grateful. You can go to our website at americasvoicenow.org. You can simply click the PayPal link, and you can make a donation there, or you can mail us a one-time payment, or you can put us on your calendar and mail us a payment once a month. I'd be grateful forever for that. You can mail it to us at America's Voice Now. That's P.O. Box 1195, P.O. Box 1195, and that's in West Plains, Missouri, 65775. America's Voice Now, P.O. Box 1195, West Plains, Missouri, 65775. You can also email me at mike@americasvoicenow.org. That's mike@americasvoicenow.org. Well, also, if you want to make a donation through a couple of silver or gold coins or something like that, I'd be grateful forever. Thanks very much. We'll see you on Monday morning. TGIF. Have a great weekend. God bless you. Keep your powder dry.